This is Dave with Fry and Bacon Studios and another Game Salad tutorial. In this private video, I'm going to show you how I designed and built my multi-touch template. And I just want to thank you for purchasing the template, and I hope it really helps you out. Now, one of the things that make multi-touch so much easier to do now is a new feature that Game Salad recently added. So we're going to go up to the Devices tab, and we're going to click on the disclosure triangle next to Touches. And then we're going to click on the disclosure triangle next to this Active Attributes. And what you're going to see is a series of booleans that categorize each one of the touches. Now, multi-touch used to be something very difficult to do as far as calculating what touch was available, which was critical to how multi-touch works, as you could see that explanation in my first video on multi-touch. So now with these new booleans, Game Salad has allowed us to see which touches are currently active and which are open. This makes the code so much slimmer when we're going to calculate or build an algorithm to determine what touches are available. That's critical because multi-touch is easy when you're going to touch things in order. But it's when you release one of the touches in the middle, say touch 3 or touch 5, when you have 6 touches, that makes it difficult to calculate which touch is available. Because Apple always goes back to, when you touch, it goes back to the lowest available touch count. So if you had 6 touches and you release the third touch, when you touch again, it's automatically going to go to the lowest available touch count, which is 3. So what I've done is I built a touch manager. So in here, this is our basic algorithm where we're going to calculate what the lowest available touch count is at the time. And we're going to produce that out to this attribute I've got called available touch. And this is always going to contain the number that is the lowest available touch in the touch count. So let's just go into the touch manager, because this is really the heart of calculating multi-touch. So as you're going to see, we've got a basic attribute in touch 1. So in game touches active, touch 1, that's the booleans, is false. That means touch 1 is available. We're going to go ahead and change that game level attribute to 1. And as we progress through each touch, we're going to see what the lowest available touch count. Now, we don't have to have all the other touches in these conditions, because we don't really care if touch 2 is available. We don't care whether touch 3 or through 11 are available or not available, because through each swipe, we're always looking for the lowest available touch in the touch count. So all we have to concern ourselves with in order to calculate the lowest available one is what the conditions are above each one. So as you see, as we progress through this code cycle, we're just looking to see if the touches available to the touch count we're at are available. If they're not, then it'll jump to this one. And if it's not, it'll jump to that one. And so it's the same progression all the way down to touch 11. When we get to the end, we do look at all the other touches. As you can see, that they're true, then that means that this is the lowest one available. This makes it really simple to code, since we're only looking for the lowest available touch count. Now, let's go in and let's talk about the touch manager for a minute. Let's go into this scene and look in the layers palette. Now what you're going to see is here I've got the touch manager on the screen. This code cycles so fast the way that I've built it, that in Game Salad, as we know, in the Layers tab, when the code is scanned, it goes from bottom to the top. So we need to make sure that the touch manager is always at the top of the layer above all the other actors that we're using for touching. If we move this, then it won't work, because this happens within one code cycle. So when you touch different things and it reaches the touch manager, that's when stuff changes. It calculates what's available and what's not. It happens so fast that this needs to be critical, that this needs to be at the top, or it just won't work. It'll glitch up on you. This makes it really fast, and I'll show you why in the code I'm able to get it to go so fast. So let's go ahead into one of our actors. Let's go ahead with a straight constraint actor that we have here. And let's go ahead and look at the rules. So we've got overall conditions. They're all encapsulated in this when simple touch is pressed rule. And then in touch 1, what we're doing is we're looking to see if touch 1 is available, if it's touch 1. So we've got a self attribute here. And let's go ahead into otherwise connection, because this is the real trick right here. So when the touch isn't pressed, otherwise is going to kick in. And so what otherwise is doing is it's constraining this self integer, the touch number, to game available touch. So what happens is that when you touch something, all right, let me get you to follow this. Since I showed you in the layers that the touch manager is at the top of the scan or the last thing to be scanned, what happens is the game level attribute in here will always show you the lowest available touch count right before you touch something. So when you touch it, it cuts off this from being changed, and then grabs on to fires the rule that this Boolean is that this integer is currently set to. So this will be looking constantly, since it's a constraint, on what's available. So whatever is available, when you touch it, it's going to grab onto it and it's going to lock out this from being changed. So we don't have to have a bunch of other rules to lock it out in conditions. And then when it gets to the cycles through, which happens in like 0.003 of a second, probably before you can reach down and touch another object, it's going to go right by the touch manager, and it's going to change that touch manager is going to change that game level attribute to the next number. And so when you go to touch again, this self touch number in the other actors is going to be switched to the next available touch count. And then when you release it, it's going to go ahead and quickly reset it to 0, and then go back and looking at what the lowest available touch count. Using this otherwise condition here is the real key to this thing being really fast. So when you touch and lift off, then the way everything's aligned in the code. So basically, all we're doing here is when the self attribute, which is linked to the game attribute that is fed by the touch manager. So when it's 1, we're going to be looking at touch 1, and we're going to be the self position X is going to be connected to game touches touch 1X. Same thing for self position Y, game touches touch 1Y, and as you would expect, 2 through 11. Okay? And here we're doing a straight constrain to the touch position, which basically no collisions or any of that kind of stuff can happen, and there can be overlaps where you'll touch two and actors will collect on each other. But basically, in these rules, you could set any condition you want inside each one of these rules. The sky's the limit. If you're only looking for a particular touch 1, touch 2, touch 3, touch 4. So say you wanted, 3 things to be touched, and then, these 3 things are touched. You could build on another condition and other rules. So basically, what this does is get everything assigned for you. And then these constraint attributes, and you could put anything in here. You could go ahead and say, well, change this number to, 1. So say you wanted 3 things to be touched, and you wanted to make sure that they're touched by 3 separate fingers, and then you wanted a condition to trigger a change of scene or whatever. You could just simply make this change a game level attribute to +1, and then have another one that's when it's touch, change it, to the attribute. You could do numerics up. So when you see 3, the total equals 3, make a condition happen. You can, the sky's the limit only to your imagination and your understanding of coding. That now that you have all the touch assignments, you can just basically go and add anything into these rules. It doesn't necessarily have to be linked to the touch or the mouse, or linked to the velocity, which I'm going to show you in this other actor to keep collisions intact. You can make anything happen. That's the beauty of code. You can code anything to happen based on these conditions. So let's go ahead and look at a touch situation with constraints not used, and we're going to use a trick that we're going to link the actor self velocity to the velocity of your touch. So in other words, the speed at which you move your finger around, the actor is going to actually be pursuing your finger, and it's not actually going to be linked to the mouse position. And by controlling the velocity of the actor instead of a straight constraint to its position, we allow collisions to stay intact. And this is probably a method that a lot of people are going to use. So now basically there are videos out there on using linear velocity to constrain for keeping collisions, but it's just a basic formula. So what I've got here, so you don't have to go through all the different touches and change the multiplier, I've made it a self attribute in here. So you're seeing I've got it set to 60 right now. So what we're doing is we're multiplying game touches minus the self position by 60. So that's going to make the speed. Now, if you want the speed of it, if it's not fast enough for you, or maybe you want it a little slower, you can just go ahead and change this multiplier right here to any number you want until you fine tune it to get it to flow how you want it to flow. And that'll help you keep collisions intact on this, and you can just drop in your collisions, whatever you want. And that'll give you what you want. And the same thing applies here for as far as the touch manager. We want to make sure the touch manager's at the top of the layer above anything you're touching. You don't have to, you're limited to 11 touches, but that doesn't mean you have to have 11 actors on the scene. You can put as many of these actors as you want on the scene and, just grab up to as many as you can. It doesn't matter. They'll all just be assigned a touch count. Now, the really cool thing about this is that these actors, you don't have to do anything to them. They're all set up so that they'll monitor individually. So you can, this basketball is just a duplicate. They're all linked to the prototype. These are all straight, no self attribute modifications. They're all just linked to the prototype actor, and you can just go ahead and option click and drag another one. You don't have to change anything, and they'll all perform to any touch you want. So anyways, this is the basics of how I've built this and how it works. Now remember, 11 touches will work on iOS devices. For Android, because of the limitations of GameSalad, it can only work for 2 touches. So you can just go ahead and you could leave the code the way it is, or you could just limit it down to 2 touches to make your scan rates, a little better. It's really not a good idea to have extraneous code in there. So you could just go ahead and in here and go ahead and delete all the rest of the touches except touch 1 and 2, and the same in the touch manager. Just go ahead and delete everything except for 1 and 2. And then when GameSalad updates its Android stuff, you could go ahead and use more touches in this with Android. So anyways, that's the basics of it. Right now, this works in the nightly build and in the RC builds. When GameSalad implements the devices, touches, active attributes into the stable build, which should be build 11, Then I'll go ahead and add to the package the stable build version. And I'm not going to put a limit on the number of times you can download this thing, so you can just go ahead back, and when the stable build comes out, I'll make sure that I go ahead and update that template. So if you want to use it in a stable build, you'll be able to do it. As I don't know if you can just go ahead and change the file extension on there yet. So anyways, this is how you use the template and all of that. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and private message me on the forums. I'm the Game Salad Guru, and I'll see if I can help answer your questions. Anyways, this is Dave with Frying Bacon Studios. Thanks for purchasing my template, and I'll see you in the videos.